Hey, brother.
Hey, brother. It's good to see you or hear you.
Yeah, it's good to hear you. Um,
It's great we're hanging out with all these people for our
yes,
exciting new podcast. We should probably welcome them.
yes. Welcome, internet, and specifically, if you're not someone who I am friends or family with already, welcome to you extra, because my friends and family are required to share and listen to this, regardless of whether or not they want to. So,
Yeah, so if you're new to the Newverth Brothers experience, you get an extra welcome. I'm Miles Newverth,
and I'm Devin Newverth.
and we are the root of all podcasts.
We sure are. That's true.
We're a brand new podcast that is here to help you guys out with one of the biggest struggles in the modern world today.
Definitely.
And that struggle is?
Well, the struggle is what podcasts to listen to. There are so many podcasts. According to podcastinsights.com, there are over 750,000 active podcasts coming out on a weekly basis. There are currently over 30 million episodes that you can choose from right now, which is too many.
Yeah, that is officially Crazy Town Banana Pants.
For sure.
So we thought we could, we need help picking podcasts, and we figured the public en masse could probably use some help as well. So we've decided to put together a sort of competition of sorts.
Yeah.
Wherein each week we will pick a topic, and we each find a podcast episode dealing with that topic, and we talk about the virtues and the faults of any given episode. And while doing that, we've actually developed a very special and specific algorithm that'll come out with a winner. So say a topic we were doing was Halloween. We could each pick an episode of a podcast dealing with Halloween. And then by the end of it, you would know which was the best podcast episode to listen to about Halloween because of our proprietary and very specialized algorithm.
A definitely real and not imaginary algorithm.
One could say it's super good.
It's the best algorithm. We have the best numbers.
Yeah.
That's what we have.
I died. You've killed me. I'm officially dead now.
The remainder of the podcast will be hosted by me only, which
and you'll just guess what my podcast
so my
was.
podcast wins. So there we go.
Perfect. So we should figure out who's going to go first, and we should also reveal the topic for this episode.
Oh yes, definitely. The topic for this episode. This is the extra special episode for our inaugural episode. Very topical.
It's going to be sharks.
Yeah, Shark Tale.
Yeah, wait, I thought it was Shark Week.
No, I definitely discussed Shark Tale.
But it is Shark Week, so why would we do one on Shark
It's
Tale?
Shark Week?
It's Shark Week. Why would we do it on Shark Tale? Brother, did you find a podcast about Shark Tale?
I definitely might have found there's sharks in it. So I think it works.
Yeah, no, I think it'll work. I'm just still trying to wrap my head around the fact that there's a episode about Shark Tale. But I guess that with the numbers you read earlier, the odds were in favor. Yeah.
Yeah.
You've listened to it now. So that's
I have. It definitely exists. I can guarantee that.
I might have to make a few adjustments to the algorithm, seeing as yours is talking about a film and mine is talking about a animal. But I'm pretty sure we've developed this algorithm pretty foolproof. Who should go first talking about our podcast?
Seeing as you died just a few seconds ago, I'll go first while you recover from death.
You're not wrong about that. So let's jump into it. Tell me about Shark Tale, words I never thought I would say.
I don't think anyone has ever thought they would say those words or hear them.
I have a first question to start off with.
Go ahead.
Well, quick question: Have you seen Shark Tale?
So I have a 6-year-old son. So I have been present while Shark Tale has played. I have never sat down with the intention of watching Shark Tale though.
Right.
But now I guarantee I could tell you the entire plot point for point.
Right. That
if you're curious.
That makes sense. That tracks actually. So what is this podcast? Please inform me.
So this podcast is an episode of the podcast We Love the Love that used to be called Heart of Podness. They can be found on Twitter at Love the Love Pod, Gmail, heartofpodness@gmail, and this was their 32nd episode of 89 current episodes that are out. So they've done almost 90 episodes, which is, it's like more than us.
Yeah, it's like 89 and a half more than we've currently recorded,
So they've got a little bit more experience than we have.
So we're the perfect judge.
Yeah. It is about Shark Tale, which came out in early October of 2004. So it's been out for a while, lots of time to ruminate and age and see how well it holds up.
Right.
It's an hour and 31-minute movie. The podcast about Shark Tale is 53 minutes. So you do save over half an hour by just listening to the podcast instead of watching the movie.
Right, that would be true.
That's a bonus right there.
But how many times did you listen to this podcast episode?
I listened to this podcast in preparation just to make sure that we could fine-tune the algorithm and make sure that it was ready to go. Mm-hmm. I listened to this podcast 3 times.
Right, so you actually lost quite a bit of time.
It would have been faster to watch Shark Tale.
Yeah.
But I would have had to watch Shark Tale.
Yeah, and we don't review movies. That's not us.
Yeah. No, I don't do that. We review the podcast. That's a totally different animal.
Yeah. So what's their format like?
So they have a little descriptor for their podcast. Let me go ahead and just read that for you. Their little quote for the. So it's Will and Mark. Will is ginger. Mark is gay. Together, they embark on an intense investigation to determine whether there has ever been a believable romance depicted in film, formerly Heart of Pod. So that's their general vibe on the podcast, is just breaking down movies to determine if any relationship in the film is believable, which is a likely chance in Shark Tale.
No, I think so. I think that's one of the things I heard about it.
So it was actually nominated for Best Animated Picture in 2004.
Oh, what did it lose to?
It was the mid-2000s, so it lost to Incredibles, because Disney always wins Best Animated Picture.
Yeah.
But it was also up against Shrek 2. DreamWorks was, like, in a zone. They had 2/3 of Oscar nominations for Best Animated Picture and still couldn't pull it out. But that's a thing that happened in 2004. So, as I said, roughly 53 minutes of podcast. So you do save a little bit of time if you're not listening to it 3 times. If you listen to it once, you save some time.
Right.
I do want to say that the first 5.5 minutes, approximately, is spent discussing Catholicism in animals in movies, some in Shark Tale, but also in a Bee Movie and Howard the Duck.
So I was familiar with some of the religious discussions around a Bee Movie, but I was less familiar with the other ones because I haven't seen them.
Well, so Bee Movie is DreamWorks as well.
Yeah. I mostly know Bee-ish is a thing.
Beezus is
no,
a thing.
Beezus exists in Bee Movie, but the Bee-ish is another
Bee-ish.
Religion. The bees are.
But so they do
Bee-ish?
have Catholicism in both.
Yeah.
Is the connection there? But they discussed, if they're both DreamWorks, is Beezus the figure that the Catholic sharks would maybe he died for the Catholic shark sins too, because maybe it's in the same universe, maybe there's a connection there, and they discussed that. So there's some religious discussion there, but it's all academic. So I don't think anyone should get too offended by that. They're not taking a stance one way or the other.
If you're not offended by Beezus existing in a Bee movie, you can probably handle this discussion, is what you're saying.
Exactly. Okay. But about 5.5 minutes before anything else, this is literally right out of the gate, you get Catholicism in animal movies.
Okay.
So that's I think that helps with the algorithm, but it really could go either way.
Right.
It really depends on how your podcast kind of, it fluxes a little bit. You get a lot of fun facts. So that's the first 5.5 minutes. They do go into the plot of the movie. Like they walk you through the whole plot. That way you can get a kind of how the characters interact, because that's what they're talking about, right?
Yeah.
But it's 53 minutes. 19.5 minutes in is when they first actually start talking about the plot of the movie. So you have to wait almost 20 minutes before you find out anything that's happened in the movie. They do give you a lot of cool, fun facts. They do spend a little bit of time talking about other movies that came out around the same time. Just as a fun fact from our podcast, they discuss 19 movies before they've started talking about the plot of Shark Tale.
Interesting. Okay.
No. Sorry, 18 before, and then they add another one partway through. So they talk about 19 movies that are not Shark Tale. Now in this, I want to say specifically that I did not count Godfather references throughout, because this movie was Godfather inspired. There is Car Wash. There's a movie Car Wash, and that is discussed, but that's relevant to the discussion of this movie, so that does not count.
Okay.
These are just movies that have little or nothing to do with the plot of the movie. There's some movies that came out around the same time. They talked about The Wizard of Oz, how it had 4 directors. They talked about the Shrek movies. They talked about Puss in Boots. 3 times they felt the need to mention that Puss in Boots was not a movie that existed. They have a hashtag about it. Hashtag I've seen Puss in Boots. They will never review Puss in Boots, apparently. So if you're listening to our podcast, definitely you should tweet at them about Puss in Boots and tell them we sent you.
Yeah.
Puss in Boots, I did look it up. Puss in Boots is a movie that came out in 2011 and scored 85% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Quality
which
work.
Is better than Shark Tale.
Yeah.
So, like, if they're gonna avoid a DreamWorks movie,
it maybe should have been Shark Tale.
Maybe, but that's not my call.
No.
Then I would have had to find a different podcast to listen to.
Right.
So I'm glad that they didn't. But that's that. I just want to get to some of the meat of the podcast now that we've talked about the first third of their podcast was going. They did a lot of research for their podcast about interviews with the producers, and I really recommend listening to the podcast whether or not you like or care about Shark Tale. They did a lot of work. They put a lot of work into it, and I think that'll really help them in the algorithm.
Yeah.
The next piece there, I think, is I think the number of hosts is vitally important to a podcast.
Right, of course.
You have to have the right number of people in hosting a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And they do have 2 hosts, as I already discussed, Will and Mark, which is the perfect number of people to host a podcast.
So one of
it's ideal.
Things we discovered early on when we were tuning the algorithm is it told us 2 people, no more, no less. So
yeah.
That's
maybe a guest spot occasionally,
sure.
But the main hosts need to be 2.
I know we were thinking about bringing a 3rd person on, but algorithm spoke and we had to send him to the door.
Exactly. It's vitally important.
Our 3rd brother, who's no longer with us because he couldn't be in our podcast.
Yeah, we had to put him up for adoption because just didn't work out. The podcast was more important.
Yeah. This is my livelihood, maybe.
How we're going to make our big buck. So, big points for research. They had really good chemistry together, talking back and forth. They did a good job of reining one another in. That way they didn't go too far off into a tangent. If one of them started wandering too far from the topic of the film or the topic at hand, the other would do a good job of reining them back in, which is important if you're trying to make some headway. But they still allowed a little bit of tangential discussion, which is important too. You don't want just a dry, fact-based podcast. If you want someone to sit there and read you the Wikipedia page, then you could do that yourself.
If you're doing a Shark Tale review, I mean, you could probably review it in 5 minutes, but that wouldn't be a good podcast episode.
Yeah. I mean, you could definitely cover the plot of Shark Tale in less than that. You could, from my understanding, assuming that Will and Mark knew what they were talking about, basically, you could watch Finding Nemo instead. That's the best review of... Finding Nemo came out around the same time, and it was discussed at the time, because DreamWorks had a history of chasing Disney and Pixar. Yeah. And so if you were going to go to one fish movie around that time, you should go to not the Shark Tale one. And that's basically your whole review. That's done, recording over.
Yeah, and that you could get that info out in 30 seconds.
Yeah. But that wouldn't be a very good episode.
No. So it's good. We know their basic opinion. Any other thing of note about their podcast in particular that really makes them stand out as a good Shark Tale review source? Oh, I gotta know. Sorry, was the relationship portrayed well?
Well, so here's the thing. I do have some quotes that I want to go over that I just love from their podcast in just a second here. I actually have a quote about the relationship quality in just a second here. I don't want to give away the end of their podcast,
right?
Because that's what they wait till the end and then they discuss that. And so that just if you want to know whether or not they thought that the relationships in a Shark Tale were believable, then hop over to wherever you just downloaded this podcast from and look up We Love the Love and find their 30-second episode and download it and listen to it.
That's 2 episodes after their 30th one, not an episode that's 30 seconds long.
Yeah, no, it's... That's true. I mean,
it's their 30-second episode, not a 30-second episode.
Yeah. It's 53 minutes.
Yeah.
That's how long it is. It's less than an hour. And then you can find out if it's a realistic relationships or not. Just some quotes from the podcast, since I brought it up a second ago, because I'm great at segues. Their basic description right away, and I wish I would have gotten to this earlier in the podcast, actually. Their description of Shark Tale is DreamWorks animated 2004 underwater mafia coming out comedy Shark Tale. Which really just, like, that's the movie right there.
Yeah,
that tells you everything you need to know.
That's fascinating.
It's Will Smith as a fish that looks way too much like Will Smith.
Right.
It's Renee Zellweger with a fish that looks like her. It's Jack Black with a shark that doesn't look like him because apparently that just is physically impossible. Robert De Niro. It's this huge star-studded cast, but literally it could be broken down into an underwater mafia coming out comedy. Like that's all you need.
I think Jack Black's face is just like too joyful, you know?
Maybe
too joyful for a shark.
I mean, they make and a joyful shark looks creepy. Like if you gave a shark the same like just joy and wondrous like that I don't think you could do it.
Yeah.
Like it would just break there would be a rip in the time-space continuum.
I mean, there are sometimes
if you made a shark look that wholesome and joyful.
Yeah, there are sometimes when Jack Black looks so joyful, he starts to look creepy. So like, I imagine that threshold is significantly lower for a shark.
Oh, definitely. Like I said, they would just right through the time-space continuum.
Yeah.
They talked about the physics of the movie. There's this problem where like they talk about up and down, and the quote is, it being Shark Tale uses underwater physics for punchlines because sometimes stuff floats up like it should in water, and sometimes it falls down, and it really just depends on what is funny. It's basically, and they make this comment as well. I'm not stealing this comment from them. I'm borrowing it. It's basically the same level of a commitment to physics that SpongeBob SquarePants has.
Right.
Only SpongeBob SquarePants is like a joke, and they know that that's a joke.
Yeah.
But yeah, it uses underwater physics for punchlines.
I would love a world where like a universe whose physics was based on what's funniest at the given moment. I feel like
so you want to live in Who Framed Roger Rabbit world?
Basically, yes.
That's what you want.
Yeah, that would be fascinating to me.
There's a quote from that movie where it's like, you could have gotten out of those handcuffs at any time. No, only when it's funny.
Yeah,
like that should be how physics works.
There's
in a perfect world.
And this is a little bit of a tangent, but speaking of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, like everyone always does, do you remember the cartoon show Bonkers?
For sure I do.
Which had like the same premise as Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but it was all animated. But some of the animated people were people, and some of the animated people were toons. Like, how does that
makes
work?
that distinction extra trippy.
Yes. At least in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, you could look at someone and know, oh, that person is animated. But like, if you were a toon shaped like a guy in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, can you tell the difference?
Spoilers for Roger Rabbit, a movie that came out before I was born, I think.
Maybe.
Spoilers. There is one character in Roger Rabbit who you can't tell is a cartoon or not by looking at them.
Right, but just the one,
in fairness.
Literally.
Just to be completely fair.
They could be all over the place in Bonkers.
Yeah, you'd never know.
All right, let's ditch this podcast idea. Launch a new podcast that's just us reviewing episodes of Bonkers. No, not it.
No.
Listen, if this
I'm okay.
if this podcast gets a million listens in the first week, we will launch a second podcast that is review of Bonkers.
Or if someone wants to recommend to us a podcast that already reviews episodes of Bonkers, I will review that podcast.
Yeah, we'll do Bonkers as one of our topics one week.
Or like children's TV shows, or like 90s TV shows, or whenever that came out. Like, we could find a way that we could do any number of topics, and we just have to tweak the algorithm a little bit, and we'd be right in the zone.
Right. So back on topic a little bit. The uncanny valley of the fish probably gonna hurt. Well, that isn't the podcast's fault. It's not the podcast's fault. They do a good job of discussing it. Right. So that'll probably help them out in the algorithm. Helps the podcast. Yeah, they bring it up. It's great. So the only other thing that I wanted to mention is, so they do discuss, the realistic, discuss whether or not the relationships are believable. And as part of that, they ask, like, if you had to choose someone in the movie to be in a relationship with, who would it be? That's a good question.
And a quote from that would be, I think I would date Martin Scorsese. Which is my favorite quote taken out of context.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to listen to this podcast just so I can get the context of that quote.
It's worth it. I like the podcast. It's great.
Yeah.
Like I said, great chemistry, lots of fun facts, kind of a little time capsule of information about the DreamWorks situation in the mid-2000s, which, who doesn't love that?
Yeah. I think there's like 8 documentaries on Netflix about that, or maybe just one, who knows. Every day's a gift.
I think that is all the information that we have to enter into the algorithm about We Love the Love.
Okay.
Their Shark Tale episode.
Pretty strong showing from them.
Definitely. I was a big fan.
Yeah, I'm getting that. That's cool. I'm gonna jump into my podcast. It's a little probably better known. It's famous in the science podcast community. I think for a bit at least it was one of the #1 science podcasts. It is called Ologies. Ologies with Alie Ward. The episode I'm talking about is episode 43, Selachimorphology, with Chris Lowe, one of the world's leading shark experts, or selachimorphologists, I guess.
Very cool.
You can find them by pretty much searching Ologies on any of the main platforms, Twitter or Instagram, as well as you can go to www.alieward.com/ologies, or Ologies merch if you're already a fan and want to buy their things, or if you're not a fan and want to buy their things.
All good choices.
Yeah.
I do like that you said it's the 43rd episode.
Yes.
So that's like right in the same ballpark of because this was their 32nd episode for We Love the Love. So that's like in a similar ballpark for how many episodes they had under their belt.
They may have came out around the same time. They might have been gunning for Shark Week. So
maybe
if I did a movie review podcast, I would pick a shark movie for Shark Week.
We Love the Love. Their podcast came out in 2018, June 24th. So it's been out for a while.
June 24th?
Which is why they have so many episodes since then. June 24th, 2018.
This came out July 24th, 2018. So that's kind of
1
funny.
month apart.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Spooky.
Wow.
But Ologies is a really cool podcast. I've listened to a few of their episodes before this. Each episode, Alie Ward, the host, which I know is going to hurt in the algorithm a little bit because it is one host, but she does always have a guest. So there's always 2 people.
That's going to come close to make that, like, that's going to help, but it's not going to quite make up for it.
Yeah, the deficit in the algorithm.
Yeah,
We'll see. The main concept is Alie Ward meets up with an ologist of some sort. So they'll look into a science that Alie Ward wants to know more about or talk about, and talk to an expert about it. And what's fun is it's basically a conversation where questions are being asked, and some of them are like, if you're a Patreon backer on Ologies, you can ask questions. But it's neat because afterwards, Alie will add in these little snippets that are like asides explaining things if the conversation didn't really lend to them being explained. So if the scientist like mentions an experiment, Alie will afterwards edit in like a brief description of what the experiment was. So I still don't understand the science of the cosmos at all, but the closest I've ever come to feeling like I might understand part of it was listening to the episode of Ologies that talked about it. They do talk a bit about shark movies as well.
Oh yeah? Did Shark Tale come up?
Shark Tale did not. I was listening along, hoping for some variation. But mostly it ended up being Jaws, because they talk about like the bad rep sharks get. Mm-hmm. Because they're like the boogeyman of the sea, which is funny because like what used to be the boogeyman of the sea was whales, and whoever is doing their PR has done such a good job. Like they really turned it around for whales.
Well, yeah.
Like, and I think the damage on whales happened longer ago. Like Moby Dick is a fairly old book at this point. Mm-hmm. And since then I can't think of too many bits of pop culture that have talked about the terrifying aspects of whales.
Yeah, well, I think you've got Moby Dick, you've got Pinocchio
Right.
gets swallowed by a whale.
Jonah.
You've got
That's
Jonah.
older-
I think those are
older
really
than
the
all of
three
them.
instances of whale swallowing.
And it just took like one SeaWorld to undo all that bad press. So
Yeah. Well, also in Nemo they get swallowed by a whale, but in a fun way. So like that I think helped the whales.
yeah,
They get swallowed by a whale and they just like take it for a ride.
they like
so,
talk
like,
to him.
Yeah.
Dory's funny, you know.
Yeah, it's a whole. It's cute.
Sharks get a lot of bad press, and a lot of it came from Jaws.
Yeah, I could see that.
Or was heightened by Jaws. But when Chris Lowe was asked like what his favorite shark movie was, he said probably Jaws, which is funny because a lot of times he's fighting these stereotypes. But he actually lived in the area where it was filmed while it was being filmed. So
that's cool.
He knows a lot of the people in his school were extras, and so it feels like coming home to him. He says it's like a family reunion. I'm like, that's fair. But they talk a lot about that. They cover a lot of shark like rumors and myths, things you can actually do to be safe if you are going in the ocean, and a lot of it's pretty intuitive stuff around any environment where there are predators.
Yeah.
Like it's the stuff you should do if you're in the woods and you're worried about bears is similar to the things you should
Thank
do.
God you said bears. I thought you were going to say if you're in the woods and you're worried about sharks.
And you're worried about
I was terrified.
sky sharks or tree sharks.
Those street sharks are coming for you.
The street sharks are strictly urban.
Did they talk about street sharks?
No, they did not. They did not mention street sharks either. That would have been excellent. I do like. There's a lot of information, but the way it ends up getting presented, because Alie pretty much starts every conversation with a sense of wonder that really hooks you in. So I think the amount of information and the way it's presented as a really manageable and like fun thing is really going to help this one out in the algorithm for the contest.
I could definitely see that.
Plus there's the element of like audience participation. Like if you back them on Patreon, you can put some of these questions forward, and the algorithm does like audience participation as well. So
definitely.
That combined with Alie Ward's big Twitter presence are really going to be helping her out here.
I definitely agree with that. I think any time that you can have one person giving information, another person kind of clueless and asking a lot of questions is definitely a good formula and will definitely help with the algorithm.
Yeah.
Especially if that happens twice per episode.
So each host gets to be clueless at some point if it has the standard and recommended two hosts. I think it's probably the perfect format for a podcast, really.
Definitely.
It's overall an enjoyable and enlightening experience. I don't know if it's as whimsical as maybe a podcast talking about Shark Tale, but as it is an entirely different genre of podcast, I don't know that it needs to be.
No, definitely not. I really think that the algorithm will take that into account.
Yeah.
They're two totally different styles of podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the algorithm can definitely, it's a robust algorithm. It could definitely handle the fact that we have two different genres of podcasts here. We have a science podcast and like a comedy movie review podcast. It's a robust algorithm. I think it can handle it.
Yeah, I think so. Well, there's a lot. One of the fun things that I learned is apparently some sharks suntan. Did you know that? They suntan.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
I call not putting on the suntan lotion on the shark.
Yeah, no, so to test this, because they weren't even sure, they ended up putting like these plastic tabs somewhere on them, on different groups of sharks that would block like all light, UV light, and no light, and then taking them off, and a bunch of these sharks ended up having tan lines from where these tabs were. So that was fun. Also, I like this a lot because Allie's talking to a scientist currently in the field.
Mm-hmm.
So the things they are currently working on can be really interesting to hear about, because they may not be like full discoveries, but things they're working on learning.
Yeah.
They had these hammerhead sharks, I believe, or they might have been little white sharks, but they had them swimming around and they were monitoring how they swam, and they would do this thing where they would swim in circles for 4 hours clockwise, and then swim in circles for 4 hours counterclockwise, and they weren't sure why until they were talking to some other scientists, and it was brought up that migrating birds will do this so they do not have to sleep, and it's believed it's because they're letting half of their brain sleep at a time. And there was no evidence or thought as to how sharks like moved while sleeping, but that could certainly be a possibility, that they just sleep half a brain at a time when they need to rest.
That's really cool and also a little frightening. Like the idea that even when it's sleeping, the shark is half awake.
Yeah. They do throw out some statistics that are pretty common about how like you're way more likely to get, or you are more likely to get struck by lightning. I think you're way more likely to get killed by a vending machine, and you're super more likely to get killed by traffic on the way to the beach than you are to be killed by a shark. Are some of the things they talk about.
So as long as you don't drive, like if you just like teleport to the beach, then you're fine.
Yeah, and if you crash on the way to the beach, it's not sharks' fault.
Yeah.
Sharks didn't do that one to you. They also dispelled the idea of Sharknado, so that's kind of a thing.
I do want to say the half brain thing. I wonder if that's where the idea, because there's this like pervasive idea in like bad motivational speakers always talk about how like sharks can't stop swimming or they die, and like maybe that's where that comes from, is like the idea that like half their brain is awake at a time, and that got mistranslated somewhere along the way to.
No, there are certain types of sharks who need to keep swimming. That's a true fact. It depends on the shark.
Well, but still, there are some sharks that have to keep swimming. Yeah. That's very cool. I could have swore that myth got busted on MythBusters, but no, obviously they were a bunch of liars.
Yeah, no, it's just certain sharks versus other sharks, and it's about breathing, and it's about oxygen in the water.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it depends what part of the world they live in and what kind of shark they are. But there are some sharks that need to, and so like they can take like small rests, but they can't like rest for the night. They would
so they can stop swimming, but it's like they're holding their breath at that point.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like how I feel in the regular workforce, you know? But not soon with our super successful podcast.
Oh, yes. All the downloads.
So many. Did you have any other questions? It's a pretty simple format, and there was a lot of information, that a lot of which I just couldn't grasp onto because it was a lot for my ADD brain. I very much enjoyed listening to it, but I do recommend people giving it a listen, specifically if you've ever been interested in sharks. And they talk about things like how Chris Lowe decided to become selachimorphologist and stuff like that. It's super neat, so I do highly recommend it. But did you have any specific questions about the podcast?
Some of the facts that you've gotten are very cool and very interesting. Very much like the other podcast. I think it's a good thing that you didn't just sit there for... How long is the podcast? Approximately, do you remember?
This episode, it's just over an hour. It's about an hour and 15 minutes.
Very cool. So an hour and 15 minutes. It's a good thing that you didn't just sit there for an hour and 15 minutes taking notes down and copying all their facts down, because that's what that podcast is. And so like people, I'm really interested in like why he would want to, what made him want to study sharks, wanting to learn more about sharks in general, seeing as Shark Week is either ending or has just ended as this podcast goes up.
Launches, depending on how quick I can edit.
Yeah. So, like, learning more about sharks sounds great. And, I'm really excited for that. I'm trying to think if I have any other questions about the episode in particular.
So the important thing we do want to do here at the root of all podcasts is listening to us is not a replacement for listening to these podcast episodes. We're just going to help you decide which one to listen to.
Yeah, which podcasts to listen to in general.
Yeah.
Because we're going to make many, hundreds of podcasts we're going to make. Hundreds of episodes because
we might have to come around to sharks again. So
yeah. So we're going to make hundreds. And we're going to help you choose many different podcasts to listen to. Another statistic from podcastinsights.com is that over half of the country, over 51% of the country has listened to a podcast. 80% of podcast users listen to 7 shows a week. So here at the root of all podcasts, we want to help you fill those other 6 slots because obviously one of them will be us.
Of course.
But the other 6 are up in the air and we want to help you make that choice.
Yeah, 100%. So I think it's time to look at the algorithm, see who came out on top on this one.
Definitely. We'll make sure we get everything entered in, all the facts and figures.
Just gotta click click the keyboard a little bit. Click, 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 click. It looks like I have all the info in if you want to double check that. And I'm going to hit enter.
Everything's great on my end.
Now. Awesome. All right, we seem to have our information here.
Ooh.
It's printing out right now. The page is printing out, and it says, oh wow.
Oh my God. Wow. I'm shocked.
I didn't see this one coming.
This is the first time this has ever happened ever on this show.
Yeah, first time. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to announce a perfect tie.
Perfect tie. The algorithm recommends listening to both podcasts. We definitely recommend listening to We Love the Love Shark Tale episode and any other of their episodes.
As well as Ologies. Definitely 100% recommend. Can't recommend it more. That's wild.
That's crazy. They both have a 100% recommendation. That's unbelievable.
It's a small world. It's a small world. We both listened to the best podcasts ever while making one of them.
Yeah. Well, the second and third tied for second best podcast.
Yeah.
Obviously.
We do want to thank you guys for listening. We want to give a special thanks to our mom for letting brother use her computer to record with.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Mom.
And
unless you're not listening to this, then no thanks.
Then no thanks. No thanks to anyone who doesn't listen, but thank you to everyone who did listen.
Yes.
If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm on Twitter at MilesN005, as well as Instagram under the same. You can find some of my acting stuff at milesnewworth.com. You can find our... where can they find the podcast's Twitter, Devin?
The podcast's Twitter is the Root of All Pod, at the Root of All Pod is the Twitter handle. So tweet at us if you have any suggestions of topics to cover or a specific episode that you want us to review, and we'll definitely consider that.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming by, and we'll see you eventually.
Yeah.
That's not a great sign-off. We should...
No. We should do a better sign-off.
Yeah, so if you guys also have ideas for good sign-offs, send them to our Twitter.
Tweet at us. Definitely at us. All right. Ta-ta for now. TTFN.
Bye.